Live.
Welcome to Daddy Porter's YouTube channel and Brothers and Booze. And tonight, man, we have a wine connoisseur with us, which is great because
hey, professional drunk, my friend. Don't box me in. Professional drunk.
That's all of us, I think.
I would hope so.
Fair point, right?
Or else I'm on the wrong show.
Kern here, he's with us, and yeah, we're gonna kind of delve into some things. I have 3 beers. I think Greg has 3, and I'm not. I believe you have a bottle of wine. I'm not sure if you're going to be sharing beers as well.
I do. I was unaware about the rule of 3s here, and I know I'm dipping over into enemy territory, but I brought something pretty special up from my cellar, so I'm.
No, the thing is, there is no rule of 3 with us. We're just here to have beverages, and wine is a whole different beast. That's a higher alcohol content all the way over. So. No worries on there, but I am just going to start off because, we have 3, so it'd be easier, I think, if I started. So I have 3 stouts because it freaking went super goddamn cold last night. We were at 65, I think, yesterday, and last night we had 75 mile per hour wind gusts and rain. And I woke up and it was like 35. I'm like, okay, well, now we're officially out of, late or early fall. So I'm going to do all stouts tonight. So my first one is something that I have had before that I love. This is a local brewery called Galaxy Brewing. They're doing something called Clax, which is a dark lime stout, which sounds like such an odd combination. That would not
sounds bad.
I'm trying to wrap my head around that.
Just say it sounds bad.
Because what I think when I open a Guinness is, what's going to improve this beer? A lime wedge in it. That's I want, hey, you got your Corona in my Guinness. Hey, you got your Guinness in my Corona.
Not quite that, but so yeah, you do get the lime right off the nose. But I'm going to tell you, this is only 5% ABV, so it's a lighter stout.
Wow. I didn't even know that was possible with stouts.
No, some stouts are pretty light, depending on the stout, right? So you got nice and on there, nice and dark like the normal stout. So the lime, because it's lime, it's really pronounced. It's actually well overtakes the smell of any sort of stout.
I feel like from a marketing standpoint, that beer would be better if the head itself was like greenish.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
However, that would require food coloring.
Figure that out, Galaxy Brewing Company. Figure that out, and you're making a fortune.
So, what's interesting about this is you get the nose of the lime. The lime comes on a little bit, and then it's stout. And the lime is just a very small note all throughout. It's not something that's like, here I'm lime. It's not that at all. It's really pleasant because it's not something you expect just to be. Oh, well, here's a stout, and it's like really heavy, but it's a lighter stout, so it's only 5% ABV, but the lime is just really pleasant with it. And it's one of my favorite local ones because it is so unique, and I don't think I've ever run into a lime stout before. Have either of you?
No, sir. Citrus, stout,
and
Venn diagrams do not cross. This is the slight intersection of the two.
So what's interesting, because it is so lower ABV, the stout part is actually really quite drinkable. It's not like you're going to drink one and you feel like you've had a loaf of bread. It's not that style stout. So I would say it's definitely more, and this is going to sound interesting just because I would view it as more of a summer kind of stout in that because of the lime, there's a freshness to it that you don't get in stouts most of the time. So I really like it. And Greg, I would not classify this as a lawnmower beer, but definitely a shower beer.
Ooh,
well, nice.
It's like a stout shandy almost.
Kind of, yeah. Because of that.
There you go.
Yeah.
We're creating our own categories here. It's a session stout shandy.
All right, Greg, what you got, man?
This.
Ooh.
Oh, you want classic? That's a good one.
You know it's November.
I went and bought these. They came out with these in cans.
No kidding.
about 6 months ago. So I went out and got them. I'm clearing my fridge, but it's still really good. It's still crisp. It's still what you want out of a lager. There's really not much more to say about it than what it is. Everybody knows the brand. Everybody knows, or most people know the brand, but everybody knows the style. I mean, it's just a lager, light, lawnmower, really crisp. Good way to jump in on any kind of beer activities. A good way to start a night, in my opinion. Start light. So yeah, nothing really much more to say about that. What's up, Kern?
Not much, man. Yeah, when I was in my 20s and I lived in Venice in Southern California, we had a local bar right on the Venice boardwalk that was known for basically its Pauliner Hefeweizens. So basically, they're serving the lager and the pilsner and some of the Weiss beers with a lemon wedge on top of it. Man, I spent the better part of several summers just like camped out at that boardwalk side bar putting down Paul Honors. So it is a beer that is near and dear to my heart, as opposed to Lime Stout, which I'm just being introduced to.
Telling you,
the beauty of this show.
I'm telling you,
right, exactly.
This shit, because you'll be surprised at how good this is.
I am going to have to seek it out now at this point. I'm going to have to.
I know they don't distribute outside of this area right now, so I'll make sure I can figure out a way to send you guys some, because because it's so unique. I think it's something that you should try.
I'm headed down after this to my local beer bar, and I'm going to order the lightest ABV stout they have and have them put a lime wedge in it. So we're going to test this theory out. Damn it!
Look at that. I like that. So what are you drinking, Kern?
So I have
first time we had a wine person on here. So we're happy.
I know. I'm like I said, stranger in a strange land, but we're building borders. We're crossing the aisle. We're breaking things down. So given that I am currently living in the great Paso Robles wine region here in California, right in the heart of Central California, Central Coast of California, halfway between San Francisco and LA, I decided to pull a wine from my cellar from one of my favorite wineries. And I know this is probably backwards in the video, but I apologize. This is from a winery called McPrice Myers. It's a 2016, what they call Sel de la Terre, or Salt of the Earth. It is 100% Grenache. And I am a Grenache head. I love Grenache. There was a few years back, maybe almost a decade ago, I remember reading article upon article saying that Grenache was the new Pinot Noir, that you were going to start seeing single vineyard Grenaches. You were going to start, there you go, boom. Sadly, it's not a mag, but that's what I've got. So Santa Barbara fruit on that from Luna Matas and Paso Robles, and then Shadow Canyon Vineyard is down in Santa Barbara. But man, it's drinking really nice. That whole cluster fermentation adds a little bit of a greenish note to it, kind of an earthiness. I have some friends coming up from San Diego who are promising to bring me a, quote, heavy dark beer tomorrow. So I missed my beer cutoff by just a day. But we're going to go out on Sunday to McPrice Myers, and if they've got this or they even have the 17, I will probably be picking up another bottle of it because it's fantastic.
Hey, so could you explain the wine variant there, the Grenache versus, is it a red? And if it is, how does it compare to something like, so you have like, I'm not a wine connoisseur, so I'm only going by what my wife drinks. Yeah. So you got, your Malbecs, your Cab Savs, your Merlots, things like. How does Grenache fit into that? Like, what's the flavor profile versus?
It's a really good question. So the three grapes that you just mentioned, Malbec, Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon, are all what they call Bordeaux varietals because they were more or less born out of the Bordeaux region, which is in the southwest corner of France, around a large estuary called the Girondine, and a couple of rivers, the Garonne and the Dordogne, which make these fantastic high amounts of limestone soil there. But basically, this is where those grapes were really came into their own. They weren't born there, most of the grapes. in the world were started out of the Middle East, kind of the Fertile Crescent between the Tigris and the Euphrates in modern day Iraq. But then the Phoenician traders kind of moved them around the Mediterranean, and that's why you see so many vineyards and so many wines coming out of Italy and France and Spain. So those wines, the three that you mentioned, tend to have heavier flavors. They tend to be very thick-skinned grapes with darker colored skins to them, heavy pigmentation, which makes a darker wine with more black to darker berry fruit flavors on it. So you're talking your black cherry, your black raspberry, your plums, black currants, things like that. Grenache, on the other hand, comes from more of the southeastern side of France, a place called the Rhone Valley, which is a north-south running valley along the Rhone River, which starts at about the town of Lyon and works its way all the way down to just outside of Marseille, where it heads into the Mediterranean. Grenache, one of the main grapes grown out there, the three main Rhone varietals are Grenache, Syrah, and Mourvèdre. Grenache tends to be, I guess you would call it the lightest of the three. It tends to have more acid than the others. The skin's a little thinner, more of a reddish to kind of violet or ruby color on the grapes. So it has a lighter color to it. But the beauty of a grape like Grenache is that you can do, it's sort of like Cab in that you can do lots of different things to it and make it in a lot of different ways. I mean, you can age Grenache in oak barrels to bring out more of the earth and the wood and the depth to it. You can do a heavier fermentation on it to intensify the colors, intensify the flavors. You can make it super light and airy. So it's just like maraschino cherry. So all sorts of variations on Grenache. But in terms of what you were saying, long answer to a short question, it's basically a lighter style of wine with lighter tannins on it.
Okay, well, that's something like, I think the problem is like, I like the darker reds because I like heavier beers. So like, there's kind of a correlation there. So like if I'm going to drink wine, I'm going to drink reds, but the problem is I think I drink the heavier tannins, and I think that's where I run into the roadblocks of hangovers.
And it works the other way, which is that, my girlfriend is not a big beer drinker, but when she does drink beer, she tends to lean into the heavier beers, your porters, your stouts, and whatnot. So it's not uncommon simply because of the weight of wine and the way it feels in your mouth, which is closer in spirit to a porter or a stout or one of the heavier beers you're talking about. But Grenache, if we're talking about kind of a beer spectrum, if you were to say that something like Malbec, which is super dark and heavy, would be like a stout. Cabernet Sauvignon would be like a brown beer, probably.
Yeah,
this would be more like kind of an Irish red, would probably be a good comparison to that.
Well, cool.
Yeah, hopefully that helps.
It does, because like I know I know a little about beer. I don't ever think I know a lot. I just don't. But I know what I like. But like wine, I'm just a doofus with. I don't know. So right. So I live pretty close to the Finger Lakes region of New York.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a shit ton of wineries near me. Right. I have no idea what I'm looking for. I just know like, oh, I like that. And so if it's whites, I'm tending to go for like dry Rieslings and things like that because I don't like the sweeter ones. Right. So, I think it just depends on your palate, just like anything else. So.
Yeah, the Finger Lakes I love the Finger Lakes as a region, but they're very kind of narrowly defined in terms of the grape varietals that are being grown there. It's a lot of Rieslings, Gewürztraminers on the white side. You may see some Sauvignon Blanc there occasionally. Yeah, and then on the red side, it's pretty much Cabernet Franc, and then a lot of the kind of the French-American hybrid grapes, as they call the GMO laboratory-made ones like Baco Noir and Marshall Foch.
Baco Noir is really good, though. That's one.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, if done properly, it can be fantastic. There's a winery in Oregon that I love in Southern Oregon that does a Baco Noir, and I did a tasting once of a vertical of their Baco Noir. So it was 12 12 consecutive vintages of Baco Noir, which was fantastic.
12 of the ladder. Wow.
Yeah, it was a very special taste.
Ladder of beer, Greg. I'd be like, I don't even know what this is.
Right. On this website, I thought it was interesting. Is it still that I still have it up here? Yeah. Let's see. Let's pull it back up here real fast. I liked how it had a drinking window.
Yeah, that's cool.
I understand that, I obviously wine, we're a beer show, so we're always going to be comparing the spirit or whatever we have against what we know, which is beer. So we know beer here. So beer has a drinking window too, but it's really never like generally explicit. Like here is your window, and this is what I like for this is what I like. I think wine people are more up on this. I think not that craft beer people aren't. I just think that it's, craft beer is such an emerging thing, and people are just doing so many different crazy things. There's just not people out there saying, "Look, we got to tell people when to drink this." One of my favorite breweries, or one of my favorite bigger breweries, is Stone, and you guys are probably familiar. They have their drink this IPA by this date, or don't drink this before. Right. And I like that because sometimes, let's just keep it real, guys. We like to keep it simple, stupid. We're drinking. And it's just easier for us to know. Like, if I don't know, Kern, I'm gonna ask you a question real quick, but because I want to know what your cellar looks like as compared to Doug's cellar. But like when you go down to the cellar, and you're looking at all these beers, and you're like, when did I get this one? When should I drink these? It's just nice when they just tell you, look, drink this now. Like, now's the time to drink it. Do you see that a lot in the wine area?
Yes, to a certain extent. Wine has a natural cheat on it, which is that the wineries are required to put the vintage on the bottle. It's actually a government requirement. And if you don't have a vintage on it, which means you're blending wines from 2 different years together, you don't have that on, but then it's known as non-vintage. And you'll see that sometimes listed as NV on it. But to be completely honest, about 90% of the wines produced in the world today are intended to be drunk within 3 years of their release date. So most wines benefit, or I guess I could say the other way, that most wines are not harmed by opening them up fairly young and drinking them at that point. Now, the opposite side of that is one of the beauties of wine is that it does have this ability to age gracefully. And as the alcohol starts to drop out, the flavors get a little more complex. You bring in some drier fruit notes, maybe a little more leather, tobacco into it. You can get some really beautiful, subtle changes in the wine because, as I often tell people who come into my tasting room, wine is, for all intents and purposes, it's a corpse in a bottle. Basically, you put a corpse in a coffin here. You've taken beautiful, fresh, right, exactly. Yes, that's why my owners don't like me working at the tasting room all that often. But if you stop and think about it, you're basically taking, living fruit, a living organism that's, attached to the vine, living and thriving, and you're pulling it off. And the minute that gets pulled off of the vine, those grapes are basically dying and are in a state of decomposition. Now, it's a slow state of decomposition, but it's happening. So when you press those grapes off, you ferment that juice down, you're adding things, you're creating alcohol to try to stave off some of that decomposition. But ultimately, over time, that's breaking down and breaking down. And the game, if you will, is to try to figure out how much of that decomposition is going to aid in the wine. And then eventually when you reach that threshold, when is that threshold when it's going to harm the wine and turn it into vinegar or something undrinkable?
It's interesting because there's certain varieties of beer that you can age really well and others you absolutely cannot. Like Greg and I have a bad habit of buying beers and not looking at dates on the can. Right. So Greg has an affinity for IPAs, which I'm not sure what you're drinking right there, Greg. So you should pull it up before we go.
So did you move on to beer number 2?
Yeah.
Yeah, I moved on to beer number 2. Sorry,
Mine yet.
it's been one of those crazy weeks. I don't know if you guys saw, I was featured on a TV clip for on the Today Show. And
That
it
was
just blew up my phone. It was amazing. It was cool, but it was kind of unexpected when it started. So like it just threw up my whole week. But I'm actually drinking or I didn't even drink it yet. It's from Matchless Brewing. It's called a Mojito.
Mojito. Mojito. Oh, that's cool. Cocktail inspired beer. From where was that from, Greg? Matchless. Where's
Matchless? Yeah, I'm gonna pull them up here real quick. They're from they're a small brewery here, or they're a small brewery, a smallest brewery in Termwater, Washington. This is one of my this is actually one of my Montana beers. I told you I'm clearing out beers.
Yes, so, you are.
I am clearing out beers. I was in Montana. What was that? 3 months ago? 4 months ago?
Yeah, that was a while ago.
So yeah, Mattress Brewing here. They don't put much on their website as far as their beers. They I don't know. They're one of these bare bones ones.
Yeah, pretty much a single sentence describing each one, and that's it.
Right. So you can tell who kind of.
Let's grab one of our bartenders to do our website and just.
Yes.
I was gonna say you can tell what kind of budget.
Code, kinda great. You're the guy. Go.
Yeah, it's. I once built a website on Squarespace. You bid? Okay, perfect. You're our webmaster. Go.
Right. They didn't have much budget on their for the web.
So how is that beer, Greg?
Apparently, they're super into fruit beers, though. Good Lord.
Yeah, they are. Wow.
Huckleberry, blackberry, blueberry, peach, berry,
beachcomber, blueberry, peach, strawberry. Look at this, strawberry, yep. Farmhouse. This beer is. I suspect it should be more hoppy, but it's pretty freaking good as far as being light, crisp. A little of that mojito on the nose. A mojito is supposed to be a mint drink, right?
Yes, it's lime, fresh lime, mint, rum, and then a splash of soda.
Mm-hmm. And you got to muddle all the
exactly.
Like the mint and all that shit together to make it kind of really pop.
Yeah, not getting mint.
Maybe that's the no in the mojito.
Fruity though. Yeah, maybe that's it. Fruity, nice. Lawnmower beer, summer beer, really nice. Actually, I like it a lot. It doesn't have nothing's really like popping out as far as like standing out as far as like too much mint.
What's funny is the body of it. The body of it looks almost like a milkshake IPA.
Yeah, it's got that kind of hazy, milky look to it. You're right.
It's a little. I can see what you're saying. It's a little thinner than that, but.
Okay, yeah, now that I see it on the full screen, it's a little thinner, but like it's in that sort of realm.
Sure. And if you would add a little lactose to this, it would like pop. Probably as one of those, let's see here. They don't put I don't see a time on here. But again, it's a little old, but it's pretty good for what it is. And I would have it again, actually. I would actually like to have it fresher.
I feel like they would be better off if they were Mattress Brewing Company instead of Matchless. Like Matchless is a cool name, but Mattress Brewing Company sounds even neater.
That sounds better. Like you're trying to do 50 Shades of Grey beer.
No, it's like take it to the mattresses. It's Godfather, man. You know.
Oh.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. So, Greg, I know it's your show, but let me ask you a question. So, like when you go to Montana and you're picking up these beers and whatnot, how do you transport them back? Did you drive out there and then drive them back? Do you have them shipped? Like, because I know when it comes to wine, there's very specific ways about shipping and, making sure that they're temperature controlled and everything, but I've never really thought about shipping beer. Take us through that.
We ship beer, but I specifically started road tripping to my beer things just so I could take my beer. Okay. So that answers your. I drive a road trip to Montana, and I specifically, the lady. First of all, the plane tickets were a mess. And the lady's like, you should drive. So I drove. And it was 20 hours, 22 hours one way.
Drive.
It was a
Jeez.
long ass drive. But
Yeah, I
it
was gonna
was
say.
great because I ended up bringing home 3 cases of beer. And I ended up taking 3 cases of beer out. And long story short, when I went to Philly, I took a case of I don't know if you're familiar with Spotted Cow beer, Nuclear Spotted Cow.
I have heard of Spotted Cow. Yep.
Right. So I took a 6-pack. I took a whole bunch of beer to Philly. I ended up trading a 6-pack of that for a case of beer in Philly. So that when I did that, I was like, oh, I need to drive to these things more. But as far as as far as taking beer, one of my friends, I was just up at Home.con. That's what the whole today's show thing was. At Home Dad convention. Anyway, one of my friends, a big beer head. Shout out to David Rogers. He's in our group. You probably see him. But this guy has a beer carry-on.
Oh yeah.
It carries bombers, and
Nice.
he just carries that. That's his quote carry-on.
He goes
Sure.
bring it all out.
And then he checks his bag, right? And then he comes to this bottle share with like 12 bombers. So I think you got to mitigate that. People stuff in their suitcases. I mean, it's just it's less regulation than on wine because beer can go up and down in temperature, and it won't. I don't think it has that effect that it would to wine. I think wine is, maybe I'm wrong, but wine is even a finickier bitch than beer is. And
It is, although
bitch.
Oh, I know. But I remember years ago with, wine has always been able to ship, and it was only over the last few years, it seems like that beer has kind of cleared through UPS and whatnot to ship. Because the issue was, there was the pressurization. And when you have a carbonated beverage, even if it's lightly carbonated, when you take that up to altitude, it increases the pressure, which could lead to the crown caps and corks and whatnot popping out, which with a still wine, you don't have that issue because, it is a little more temperature regulated, but it's less of an issue that you're going to get spillage. Breakage, sure, but not necessarily some sort of leakage or spillage coming out of the bottle.
Well, and we also, Doug, we got to get to your second one, but real quick though, we also have problems sometimes. I don't know how this works in wine, but sometimes in craft beer, if the brewer doesn't do his job right, you have exploding bottles. So, and that sometimes is if people just move them. Like people are like, oh, I just went down and moved the box and they exploded. So do you have any of that going on?
That is, you will hear stories about that. There was actually a news story that made the wires and went viral. I want to say earlier this year about a Italian Prosecco house. And of course, Prosecco, a sparkling style of wine where they actually pump the CO2 into it. So it's a lighter style of wine meant to be drunk young, not as age-worthy as a true champagne where you're doing the secondary fermentation in bottle. But somehow, due to a screw up, the entire silo of Prosecco ended up exploding and sending sparkling wine shooting everywhere. So I have winemaker friends who, have had some wines that have inadvertently gone through secondary fermentations after bottling. So they've had corks firing off in the middle of the night and whatnot. It is a bit of a rarity, but every now and then that happens if you don't get your fermentation down to absolute zero, if you leave a little residual sugar in there and somehow a natural yeast slips its way into the bottles if you haven't fully cleaned each one before you bottle. So it can happen, but I think it's a little bit more of a rarity than it is on the beer side of things. Ooh, look at that, pretty pictures.
So Doug, what do you got?
I'm going to go with my second one. This one is actually from Maine, and I didn't even realize it, which my wife and I vacation in Maine almost every year. Maine's awesome and fun and gorgeous.
Maine is.
Something called Gunner's Daughter Brewery.
Gunner's Daughter Brewery?
Gunner's Daughter Milk Stout from Mast Landing, which is a place in Westbrook, which is a place we normally are fairly close to. I'd never heard of this brewery, but this is a milk stout. It is a as they say, a beautifully aromatic milk stout with bold flavors of peanut butter, coffee, and dark chocolate.
Wow.
5 ABV, not a high ABV, which is fine, but I really want to see if we get the peanut butter and chocolate flavors out of this. Because if it's a low, oh man, the peanut butter on the nose is just woohoo, baby.
Peanut butter milk stout.
Fascinated by that.
And I have my famous peanut butter porter here. Look at this.
Ooh.
I didn't even do that on
That's
purpose.
the pour though. Really nice.
Damn. Okay.
Man, the peanut butter on the nose is just really
Peanut
pronounced.
butter, coffee, and dark chocolate.
Yeah, coffee and chocolate not on the nose at all. It's all peanut butter right up front.
So you got a peanut butter cup and a glass. Let's go.
There you go. It's your Reese's stout.
Right. For Halloween.
Chocolate, very little chocolate, no coffee, all peanut butter. This is literally, like you said, a Reese's peanut butter cup in a glass. It's delicious. It's just,
Okay.
you can't promote it as something like, oh, we're going to put all these other flavors. Just say it's a peanut butter freaking stout and you'll be great.
Or it's somebody doing a bulletproof coffee, but the wrong way.
Yeah. It is really yummy, but all peanut butter. To me.
It says it's balanced. Is it balanced?
Aromatically, it's just peanut butter. I'm telling you.
Mm.
So what you're saying is that the aromatics are the aromatics beautiful?
They are. If you
Okay.
like peanut butter, I love peanut butter. So to me, that is, as Jill went,
Is it overpowering though, even if you like it?
No, not on the taste. On the nose, it is.
Oh, okay. Oh, I'm cool with that on the nose. I'm cool with that. But if the taste is overwhelming, then I got an issue.
So that sounds very similar to I splurged a couple weeks ago, and I'm a huge LaCroix, whatever you want to call it, drinker. I've given up soda and drink nothing but the sparkling seltzer these days. And the holy grail of LaCroix is they do a cola flavored version of LaCroix, which I'd never seen in stores, and I had to go on Amazon and buy it. And brought it in, and you pop it open, and it is just straight up like Coke or Pepsi on the nose. It is shockingly so. But then when you consume it, it actually has this almost like bitter dark chocolate flavor to it. It's very intriguing. I've taken some spiced rum with it, a little lime juice, and made some fun cocktails. But yeah, it was really, really unique.
Cool. And now it's time for our sponsor.
Hey!
Hey!
The sponsor is here. What's up, people?
What's up? Tell us about yourself.
Yeah, so I am Kern. I am the co-host of the One Bourbon, One Shard, or One Beer podcast, which is the first, only, and best drinking musical game show podcast on the interwebs. We're lucky enough to have my main man, Daddy Porter, down there on our most recent episode, which just became available for download today. So if you want to hear him in all his glory, listen to it on wherever you get your podcasts, Stitcher, iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever it might be. Search for One Bourbon, One Shard, or One Beer. My co-host Stub and I will each pick a playlist every episode of 7 songs built around a specific theme. I know for yours, Greg, the theme was The Evil That Women Do, which somebody had a great comment that The Evil That Women Do with Greg Washington is not a very accurate title.
That was great.
But anyway, the other co-host and our guest have to decide whether each song is a beer song, a wine song, or spirit song, and whether what the specific libation that goes with that song is. You get points if you get it right. You get bonus points if you guess the correct libation. It's basically just a chance for us to sit around for an hour, hour and a half, bullshit, talk about music, booze, kind of like you guys do here, but we add a competitive notion to it because Stub and I are both competitive assholes. So it works out nicely.
And what else? So tell us a little bit about what you do in the wine area, how you got there, all that. I'm fascinated.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, I've been in the wine industry for, gosh, nearly 15 years now. It all started way back in 2006 when I was just a little dabbler of wine and, liked stuff, but wasn't a connoisseur by any stretch of the imagination. My girlfriend and I ended up at a writers conference. Doug, I know you guys are writers, and we talked a little bit about what you guys are working on for NaNoWriMo, and my girlfriend is now a published writer. But we were at a writers conference in San Francisco. We ended up sitting next to a woman who, she's American, but she's married to a 7th generation French winemaker. And basically, we enjoyed our weekend together. She invited us to come out to their property. We started a little company running wine tours and writers retreats out to their bed and breakfast in the Rhone Valley of France. And being over in the mother country, being in the vines, hanging out with her husband, learning how wine was made, drinking these amazing wines, it lit the fuse. We all have that moment when you decided to take your enjoyment of kind of casual enjoyment of your beverage of choice up to the next level and become a professional about it. And that was mine. So yeah, since then, it's just been pretty much, I've had about every job in the wine industry that you could have. I had my own wine shop in Southern California for several years. I launched a website focused on lesser known and uncommon varietals, regions, and producers, where I was touring around the country doing tastings and presentations at different wine bars and restaurants and whatnot. I've had an online wine business. I ran a business where I would put together privately branded fundraising wine clubs for nonprofit organizations. I was a general manager of a winery here in Paso Robles, and I'm working on a top secret project right now where I may become the winery owner myself. We'll see. Knock on wood. I know. You heard it here first.
It's not secret anymore because our 2 followers saw it.
That's okay. I know one of them is Stub, but it's new to Stub. So it'll get out wide on that. Yes.
Right. Well, man, that's excellent. Again, I knew you had an extensive history in wine. I didn't know it went back that far. Wow, man, cool.
Yeah, thank you.
I started in wine, but something about beer caught me. But I absolutely started in wine, and I was getting to the point where I was getting to the wine tastings and pairings and stuff. Yeah. And this is where I love talking about to a wine person because I love beer and food pairings, and I know that's something that like wine people started that. Right. In my opinion, like that's a wine thing, and I think beer's kind of come over and taken over. Have you seen or been to any of the beer wine tastings? And can you talk about like the difference between a beer tasting and a wine tasting or anything like that? Like,
yeah, no, I've been to several of both, and you're right. I mean, the thing about wine is we are the lowest on the pH spectrum when you look at the major alcohols out there, and typically a wine is somewhere between about 3 and 3.5 pH on the pH scale, where beers tend to be anywhere from, I don't know, about maybe 5 or 6. They're closer to 7, which is pure water in that sense. There's still a little acidity to them, but not nearly as much as wine. And typically, acid is known to break down food, and the more acid you have, the more you break down the food and bring out different components and different flavors of it, which is why I think that wine has always been kind of tied to food in that sense. This idea that if you've got a heavier piece of meat, venison or lamb or a nice cut of beef or whatnot, you want something with that higher level of acid as you're chewing it to help you break it down and digest it better. But I love the fact that beers have become so sophisticated and we have so many different styles of beer now available to the public because, even, maybe 20, 25 years ago, most beer drinkers knew lagers and that was about it. Maybe a Pilsner, And you didn't have the stouts and the porters and the sessions and the Rausch beers and the brown beers and the alt beers and all the great, sours, exact lambics, all sorts of the different variations that you have on things, and the level of people being able to experiment with them. So what I love most about the food pairings with these is, there are some crossover, but there are certain foods I find that absolutely, without a doubt, pair better with food. And there are certain foods, or pair better with wine, I should say. And there are certain foods that absolutely, without a doubt, pair better with beer. And one of them is super controversial, which, for years people have had wine and cheese. That's been a big thing. But most cheese and wine pairings are really bad. And if you stop and think about them from a chemical standpoint, they don't really work, because red wine tends to be so big and bold of flavor that it's going to take over and mask the subtler flavors of a very alkali style cheese. Whereas beer, being closer, is a much nicer pairing with cheese and brings out more of the subtlety and the different flavors in it, and vice versa. Whereas I think as you get into more of the like vegetables, things that could use a little bit of acid to break them down, I think wine tends to be a stronger pairing with like roasted, grilled vegetables, stewed vegetables, things like that, than a beer. I mean, it still tastes great together, and that's the beauty of wine and food and beer and food pairings. Is I always tell people, whatever you think, like, it doesn't matter. One of the things I love to do is have people, when they go to a restaurant, and you can do this with beers too, although it's easier to do with wine. When you go to a restaurant, and if there's a sommelier or a food and beverage director, whoever is helping you that's fairly knowledgeable about wine, first of all, don't be afraid to use them. Those people are there for a reason. And if you don't know anything about wine, like, use their help, because they will be able to point you in the nice direction of a good bottle. They're not going to try to price you out at some huge price point that you can't afford. They're there to work with you on that. But one of the things I love to do is, if I know what I'm going to order on a menu, I say, here's what I'm going to order. What I want you to do is bring me 3 samples from 3 different wines. Bring me a sample from 3 different wines. 2 that you think would be a good pairing with this one, and 1 that's totally off the wall that nobody would think of as a good pairing with this. Let me try all of them. I will commit to at least a glass of one of them, but let me do that. And invariably, you'll get a chance to try some really interesting things. And that sort of off the wall selection will more often than not be the one that you find most interesting in the thing. And I think you can do the same thing with beer.
I think you're right. Like, Greg, I don't know if you've had this thing, but most places I go, like, if you're going to be interested in a beer, they'll go, do you want a sample? Mm-hmm. And they might give you, here's a little sample. But usually that's if you're just trying beer. I haven't done it in the context of what you're talking about.
No. And I don't know if I would. Now I would. I don't know if I would.
I would have been like, I don't know. And the thing is, like, so like you said, if you see somebody who's a sommelier or for a beer, it's a Chicharron.
Right.
I'm mispronouncing that again.
That's right. Chicharron. You got it.
But having somebody there, if that's their job is to, 1, try stuff and bring things into the place, and 2, to try to hook you up with what works with what you're trying. Interestingly, when my wife and I were in Scotland, we went to a distillery called Dalwhinnie. Mm-hmm. And Dalwhinnie did a chocolate pairing with their scotches.
Yes.
So not something I ever thought of, because, I love scotch, but I was a novice. I'm still a novice, but the idea of having, like, here's these gourmet chocolates. So what you would do is you get these chocolates that are they're this big.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's a little square.
So you take a bite of them and you let that dissolve in your tongue, and then you bring in the scotch, and they say, put the scotch in your mouth and then go, and then just let all that blend. And it was like just this whole, like, fucking fireworks of flavors going on in your mouth that, like, It was almost like that's too much. Like, it was too many things going on. So, I find it fascinating, just the idea of pairing different alcohols with different things you eat, because that's kind of how it works. Like you think like, oh, I'll just have a glass of wine with this Italian food. Well, okay, well, you have a red, but that red might not really be suited with that particular kind of food. But you're just thinking,
Absolutely.
oh, well, it's a red wine, it's Italian wine, it's a Chianti, and it's going to pair with everything Italian. No, it's not. It's going to be something that you need to try to figure out.
Yeah, and it's interesting you bring up chocolate because that's another food product that actually chemically does not work well with wine and is better suited to something like a beer or spirit to break down the components of it because it has that high level of oil to it. And something at a lower alcohol level like wine, but with that high acid, is not adept at breaking down the oil and the components in chocolate.
But that's not how it's always shown. It's always shown wine with chocolates.
Oh, I know, and that kills me. Believe me, whenever I go into a place that has the little chocolates out there, A, it means they have a dessert wine, which is problematic enough. But B, especially when they try to foist like a piece of chocolate on a cab or a Zin for me, I'm just like, I want to throw it back in their face. I want to spit on them.
So I'm gonna jump on, or you go, Doug. I'm gonna jump on. I'm gonna start doing my third here.
I got another one yet too. Go.
But no. You want to follow up on Kern while I do this? You go.
Yeah.
He's got the peanut butter porter.
Well, no, I don't. That I'm still drinking, but I have another one. But like what? Yeah, it's interesting. Just the idea of like everybody has. I've always heard like, oh, chocolate and wine pair so well, and it's like the chemical composition of it doesn't work as well. Is there certain wines that work better with chocolate or no?
I mean, dessert wines technically do because they typically have a higher level of reserve. Wow, that's quite a head on that bad boy.
That's what she said.
But yeah, because they have residual sugar in them. Typically, they're a higher level of alcohol and a lower acid level on them. So things like ports and Madeira and late harvest wines will be in that sense. But typically my advice if you're going out wine tasting is, save the chocolate for the very, very end after your wine tasting, because it's a nice way to kind of cleanse the palate afterwards.
Okay, so what do you have?
Okay, so actually,
you poured.
Remind me because I'm drinking. I got a question for Kern about the tasting of wines.
Yeah.
This is Dangerous Man.
Oh.
Peanut butter porter. It's Dangerous Man is, for those who don't know, Minneapolis, St. Paul. They are one of the best breweries up there, I believe. When people go up there, they say you have to go to Dangerous Man. It's one that's cited. I was just up there and I asked all the locals, where do you go? They keep saying Dangerous Man. This is the place. This is their flagship beer. Of course, a place that has a flagship beer porter is my speed. I do love peanut butter. Don't get me wrong. But I'm not a huge peanut butter fan of my beer. So yeah, it has to be subtle. I don't want it overpowering. Look how it kept its head though. I mean, I poured it a while ago and it's still going. That's a really good thing there. Predominant peanut butter. So
yeah.
Like all over the place. It says here on their lovely website here, I have it brought up here. Do I have it brought up? Yes, I do. Where is this at?
Pull it up. I'm going to step away for a minute.
I feel like you guys need to do a blind peanut butter porter tasting and figure out which peanut butter is the best butter.
Oh my God, this is so good. It's not a peanut butter cup in a glass.
Mm-hmm.
Because the roast and the chocolate kind of subdues the peanut butter. You can still taste the peanut butter, but the chocolate and the roast is like, hey, I'm here.
Yeah.
And with a Reese's cup, it's more about like the peanut butter, and then the chocolate's like, hey, I'm here a little bit. This is like they're both kind of together.
Yeah, because on a Reese's, if you look at a Reese's, like the ratio of peanut butter to chocolate is overwhelmingly peanut butter in that bad boy.
Right.
Whereas I suspect with the roast, it's going to be closer to chocolate than peanut butter.
Yeah, but they say toast. Toast is probably right. But
Yeah.
toast and roast are kind of that, you know what I mean? They're that same, in my opinion, they're that same kind of like feel and taste, especially in beer and in dark beers. Toast and roast are kind of like, roast is a little bit, I guess roast is, I guess it gets to be roasty when it's a little bit burnt, I guess.
Right. That's what I'm thinking is, sometimes they'll toast the barley or the malt or whatever it might be before you do the mash.
So on a beer like this, and I could segue back to what I was going to talk, what I was looking to ask you about. It's great. So in a beer like this, which is a porter or a stout, sometimes even with porters, I don't advise with porters in my opinion, but sometimes people do it. They let them warm up, and
Mhm.
then they see the profile of them, and the profile changes. So you started the whole show. You've been drinking one thing the whole show, and that was that wonderful wine that you showed us. So
Yes.
does the profile change with wine as it warms up? Where are you at as far as how do you, what's the serving temperature? There's times where Doug's like, oh, I got my stout, but I need to take it out and we'll do it at the end of the show because he
Right.
wants the stouts to warm up because
Right.
he believes it gives him a better profile. Does that work with wine? Where are we at with wine and all that?
It does, absolutely. So there are certain temperatures that you want your wine at. You want a slight chill on them. And the numbers are kind of very well known in the wine community, which is white wines you typically want to serve at about somewhere between 40 to 55 degrees is kind of ideal for whites. You can put a little bit more of a chill on them, but you don't want them to be like straight out of the icebox cold, because with a higher alcohol level of wine and because of the volatility of that alcohol, that's where you get your aromatics. And the colder a wine is, the colder the alcohol in it is, the less of the evaporating aromatics that you get, which ultimately it's the evaporation of the alcohol that leads to the molecules being uh, disconnected and reconnected over and over again that leads to the different aroma profiles that you're getting on it. It's why with a glass of wine, we serve them much like we do in beers in, kind of a narrowing cylinder, so that you're capturing those aromatics in there. But the beauty of wine is the more oxygen you bring into it, the more of that alcohol that you allow to evaporate, the differences, you're going to get increasing differences in the aromas. So you can, I mean, I've had wines, honestly, where I've sat there for 45 minutes to an hour and not taken a sip of it and just enjoyed the scents every 30 seconds to a minute, because it evolves over the course of time, which is beautiful. And the same is true with the flavors. The more, it's why it's common with some bigger red wines for people to aerate them or put them in decanters to allow them more oxygen to really open up, allow those alcohols to evaporate, a lot of the harsher phenols in them to kind of peter off and bring out more of the fruit, lighten it up, soften up the tannins in them as well.
I say a lot. Doug's heard me say a couple times. I sometimes fight whether I like smelling beer or drinking beer more.
Yeah.
They're like, really? And I'm like, yes, because the what they're doing with beer now and the aromatics is just amazing. What they're able to do with dry hopping and
Mm-hmm.
all this different things, the way they make, again, you're almost, in my opinion, missing part of the art if you don't sniff it.
Yeah. Well, and I think I wanted to kind of circle back to this. The two major differences to me between beer and wine, is that with beer, you have this luxury of being able to add ingredients to it and only enhance the profile of it. Whereas with wine, because it already has such a strong, powerful flavor to it, you actually can damage a wine if you try to add in fruit flavors or different herbs or spices or whatnot. Cocoa nibs, yes, exactly. Any of that stuff. Then you become Arbor Mist, and you're the favorite of housewives in rural West Virginia. So,
or you go, Kern, you go.
I was going to say, then the other major difference between beer and wine to me is that beer is much more experimentative in that, you can whip up a batch of beer pretty much any time. And from the minute you finish boiling to bottling, it takes a very minimal amount of time before that is drinkable and ready to go. Plus, you have pretty much unlimited amounts of access to, wheat and barley and malt and all the ingredients you need to make
Weed
beer.
and barley.
Well, did I say weed? I didn't mean weed. Sorry. Although I know there.
No, I know you said wheat. I was
there are right.
But
Actually,
but with wine with grapes, you get one shot a year to basically harvest your grapes, press them off, and then you still have a delayed period where you have to allow that natural fermentation to happen for weeks on end and for that wine to settle. So it's going to be a minimum of 5-6 weeks to 6 months at a minimum before that wine is ready to drink on its own. So I think in that sense, you get people who are less experimentative with wine because you're so limited in your resources. Whereas with beer, if you fuck up a batch, I'm just going to go buy some more ingredients and, tomorrow I can go make a brand new batch of it.
Or throw cocoa nibs in it.
Or apparently peanut butter. Just plenty of peanut butter will even out everything.
Throw some lactose in it.
Yeah.
Throw some right. No, this is true. Uh-oh.
Last one, dragon's milk.
This is the white.
Dragon's milk, because we're bringing that shit up now. Dragon's milk. New Holland is, in my opinion, the anti-Founders. Buy New Holland beer, thank you.
Nice.
Don't buy Founders, even though they settled. They should have said they settled today or yesterday. When did they settle? Because we talked about it on One Bourbon, One Char, One Beer.
We did.
We talked about it last week on Brothers and Booze, and now we're going to wrap it up. They settled. They should have settled like 6 months ago, and now they even set it up where they fucked up even the settling, in my opinion, because now they settled and people are even questioning why they settled, and they only settled because all this shit came out. So they even fucked up the settling. Like
drink bells, drink bells, people.
Drink bells, drink oh my goodness, with
whatever
those torches up there, short bells. I mean, there's just
I was in my grocery store. They today Wegmans they had a shit ton of CBS, and I'm like, I'm not buying a fucking bottle of that shit.
Yeah.
Did they have KKKBS?
Nice. It's funny. We have
a friend.
I can tell you, we had a controversy. It wasn't as bad as the Founders situation, but here in Paso Robles, we had a pretty large winery that got into some serious hot water a few years back here in Paso Robles, and led to a lot of boycotts of their wine, at least locally. Unfortunately, I don't think it reached the national level like the Founders story did, which is really going to, crash their bank book. But it was fascinating to watch a winery really kind of twist and turn and succumb to popular consensus with that.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like they came around to where they needed to come around to. So back to New Holland. New Holland's awesome, great. I was there 2 years ago or last year. I will go back in a second. Fantastic.
So this is a bourbon barrel aged white stout.
Ooh.
So you think bourbon barrel aged anything is going to be high ABV? This is 6%. So I'm
guessing it must be a really, really used bourbon barrel then.
Well, the thing is, I had one person say, I didn't really like this, and everybody else I know that had this was like, this is amazing.
So what makes a white stout? I have to admit I'm not familiar with, and coming on the cusp of us just talking about Founders, I'm even embarrassed for myself mentioning the term white stout. But what makes a white stout?
It's a light, the light color, really. Is the white stout part, is that it's not, because again, when you say stout, you think dark, and that's what you should think. You should think black or brown or Guinness. When everybody thinks stout, they think Guinness, and that's where you should be, in my opinion. You think it's going to be dark, roasty. Now they're trying to do these. They're trying to do these. No, not trying. They're doing these stouts now that are light in color, but they drink heavy like a stout. So where you at with that though?
It's really good, but it's not. You know, Dragon's Milk's probably my favorite stout. Period.
It
If
is.
if I'm gonna pick a stout, this is my favorite stout. Dragon's Milk is it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's lighter, which makes it a little more drinkable because Dragon's Milk's a heavy fucking beer. It's 11% ABV from the top. This is 6. It's more drinkable from that perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not the dark Dragon's Milk. It's not that.
Some people want a lighter. Some people don't like the heavy.
So it's Crystal Pepsi.
Right, right. Some people don't like the heavy feel of a stout with a heavy mouthfeel. So I think that's where they're going for with these white stouts. I'm not particularly a big fan of them, to be honest with you. A lot of them are really good. But what they try to do too, Kern, is they do these white stouts and then they try to do coffee white stouts.
See, that's so you guys are gonna have to kind of walk me through, like, what is the chemical process, or what's the preparation that makes a stout? Because to me, I look at that and I go, like, I don't see how that's different from like a Pilsner and a lager, and I know those are prepared different ways. Is it because typically with a stout, it's like you roast your grains, right? And that's what gives it that sort of charred, and it unleashes the flavors and brings out that darker color. So are you using the same grains that you would use for a stout, just not running a toast through it? Or what's the difference between what makes a stout in that darker, thicker color, and then what's the difference of a white stout?
So I'll be honest, I'm not a brewer, so I don't know. I'm just going to speculate. Yeah. And the reason I speculate is because these things are new. Now, they just started showing up on our screen about a year ago.
Yeah, I've had some blonde stouts that I really liked. So here's the thing, like, I've had blonde stouts, like Joe and I, when we were up in upstate New York. Now we're in upstate New York, but we were migrating closer to Buffalo.
Right.
So at a wedding, and they have quote unquote blonde stouts. Now, the blonde stouts are very creamy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, just like if you had a creamy stout, very similar to Guinness.
Right.
This is not that at all. It is a white stout, which is it's not as roasty. It's not as heavy. It's a good beer. It's a really good beer. Eminently, if you're going to have multiple beers, this would be preferable to having Dragon's Milk, like the standard stout.
Right.
But I'm saying that if you're a regular beer, now I can drink 4 Dragon's Milks and I'd be really happy. I'd also be drunk. This would not be the case. You could have 4 of these and you wouldn't be drunk, but you would really enjoy the flavor. But it's a different flavor profile. There is a roastiness to the regular Dragon's Milk that is not present here.
Mm-hmm.
But that's okay. It's just a different style beer. It's 6% ABV. It's not meant to be a high gravity beer. I really enjoy it just for the sake of it. It's a different thing. Now, I'm also serving it in the wrong glass, as you can see from the thing.
Right. They have fancy glasses that you have to have there.
You know, I grabbed a glass
at
local breweries that I really like, and I think it's really good. I really do. I think it's, if you're looking for something you could drink more than like 2, 3, 4.
Okay, this is fascinating. Now scroll up a little bit, Greg, and let's go to the breakdown. So look where it says a little bit down below that. Serving temperature, again, between 40 and 50 degrees. So similar to what you'd serve a white wine at. And again, that's, I think, to probably unlock a lot of the aromatics in it. So.
Yep. And Karen, to answer your question, I suspect here, because I was hoping that they would give us more. Some breweries, it's funny because I don't know how it works in the wine area, but some breweries literally put their whole recipe on their website. And then some breweries literally put a story of a fable of like some like unicorn dragon dude. And that's how they describe their beer. So I was hoping that they would give us a little bit more here to answer your question. But I'm going to try to answer your question because I suspect that I think it's about the malts in the beer.
Okay.
I suspect they use lighter malts as opposed to chocolate and dark malts that they would use for and coffee malts, because a lot of these beers that have coffee in them don't have coffee in them. They have coffee malts.
Right, of course.
That impairs that coffee. So I suspect they're using probably maybe ale, maybe even yeast. I'm sorry, malts.
If you scroll down a bit, it said they were using caramalts, which I found a really clever name there.
There you go. There you go. As opposed to dark or chocolate, which dark malts and chocolate malts give you, not only do they give you that that flavor, they give you that color. So
Right.
That's what I suspect it is. I'm not sure, and I haven't been working at a brewery that has pushed out a white stout. But I guarantee if I was, I'd be like, "What is going on there?"
You would know. You'd be like, "Actually, you give me the well, actually, you'd well, actually, Kern."
Well, actually, because again, you're right. I'm with you. When they first started coming out, I'm like, it was just suspect. Like, it's just always when I hear something different, like, "Oh, there's a white raspberry with cocoa nibs." I'm like, "What the?"
Okay, man, you got to get over this cocoa nibs thing. Seriously.
Oh, the cocoa nibs, man! It's everywhere. They're all over the place.
But it's funny you were mentioning like that. Some breweries will give you the full recipe. Others will give you the story. This is a good example where I love McPrice Myers, and again, I apologize for this being backwards, but basically the back of the label says Paso Robles. It says Grenache. And then it says, "May the road rise to meet you. May the sun shine warm on your face. The rain fall soft upon your fields. And until we meet again, may God hold you in the palm of his hand." Like, I don't know what that has to do with wine. It's certainly not going to sell me on this bottle having that little, Irish prayer or whatever it is there on it. But
live, laugh, and love.
Right, exactly. And a lot of wineries will do that, where they'll really limit the information, or they'll put, their bio or a map of where their winery is located, or all sorts of things, instead of putting tons of factual information. And then some wineries will just dump, like, boom, you want to know the pH? Here it is. You want to know the total acidity of this? Boom, here it is. You want to know the volatile acidity? Boom, here it is. Like, give you the entire layout of the differences in it. It's a winemaker's choice, and I think it's a brewer's choice as well.
Kurt, I have a question for you.
Please.
So you were talking about earlier about how you go to these fine wine establishments or whatever, or even even a winery, and there'll be sommeliers that's there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So then, so my question is, and this is really interesting to me. So I can go to a fine wine place and I can ask for samples of the wine before they even bring it out.
Well, if you go to a restaurant, typically a restaurant will have a by the glass wine list. And almost every restaurant, properly done, will allow you to have a taste or a sample of the wine before you commit to buying a glass of it. If they don't, then it should make you wonder about that restaurant, because there's something wrong. Now, obviously, if it's and there's not a lot of restaurants that will have, super expensive wines at like $30 or $40 or $50 a glass open, because that's just far too much of an investment to have that bottle open. And, if you open it and somebody buys one glass and then it's sitting around for a couple of days, you got to get rid of it. But in most cases, I would say 90% of cases, you are, if the wine is available by the glass, then they'll let you have a sample of it. And depending on how extensive the by the glass list is, you should be able to sample a few things before you commit to a glass or a bottle of it.
And I'm not trying to be unreasonable, but
no.
in the spirit of pairing, and you even framed it perfectly. You're like, okay, this is what I'm going to eat. Can you bring me like at least 3 wines and I can try them? And I never thought of that, because I always tell people, especially in breweries, people are like, well, what do I do if I don't know what to drink? You ask for samples. And I tell them the same thing you said. And what if they don't give me samples? Then you walk to the next brewery that's probably two blocks down the street. Like,
exactly.
Or you go somewhere else, because like if they don't want your business if they're not trying to. And it's different with beer, because again, there's taps. So like, don't tell me you can't just give me a little bit of a pour. Now wine's a little bit different because again, they're coming bottles, and in my opinion, I just think of wine as, to me, wine is more of an expensive habit.
Well, except
maybe that's just in my head, but I just think it's more. So I'm more or less likely to be like, give me a sample or demand a sample when I know that that bottle could be like $200 a bottle or something, and I'm just like,
well, yeah, if it's a bottle, again, if it's a sealed bottle, they're not going to give you a sample of it if they don't already have a bottle of it open to do so. There you're out of luck. But if it's a by the list glass, it's the same thing with, if I walk into a bar and they've got, 50 taps, but the beer that I want is only available in bottle, I'm not going to say, oh, like, can you open up that bottle and give me a taste and then I'll buy the rest of the bottle or something like that? Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Not going to happen. Right. Very few places. I was at Red, what is it called? Red Rider. There's a place in Orlando that I was at. It was a beer bar, and the guy said, if you don't like it, I'll buy the beer back from you. And it was a bottle. So, but those are rare occasions. But I'm just saying, I just want people to know that, like, again, if it's by the glass, it's the same. You're just telling me it's the same way as in a brewery. Like, just be cordial about it.
Yeah.
Don't be an idiot about it. Don't be asking for 10 samples.
Right.
Exactly. I tell people, don't be asking for 10 samples. Like, or if you roll up to the bar and the bar is full, get one sample, and then that's all you can really ask for. They're busy. Don't be trying to try all their IPAs while there's like a line of like 6 people. Like, there has to be a nuance there. Like,
and the other thing I would say is, don't be afraid to try things side by side. So if you have 2 wines that you're interested in, and you can do the same with beers, if there are 2 beers that you are interested in, want to compare them side by side or try to figure out which one you like best, ask for samples of both at the same time. Try them side by side, one right after each other, and be able to go back and forth, and then you can commit. And most places, again, will do that. If you're at a place where they're hesitant against that, it means they've gotten burned by 20-something guys and girls who will basically try to do samples and then get out without paying for anything. But I agree with Doug, which is basically, you need to just, or I guess, and you said this too, you just need to get out and go patronize another place, because there's rules and they're not abiding by them.
No, so I don't know. Again, not everybody has my schedule, but I just love rolling into places like these in the afternoon or the early evening before there's a crowd and it's just you and the bartender. And that's when you can really, or you and the wine guy, that's when you can really like get to know what's going on. And you can also, usually a lot of times they're like, here, man, try this. Usually, So it's about like when you roll up to a place too.
The best days to go wine tasting are Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays, because you're not fighting the crowds. Typically, the people working those days are somebody who's tied to making the wine, or the winemaker themselves, because they're less busy, so they're not going to hire somebody to work that day. They'll work it themselves. And you're pretty much getting the place to yourself. And if there are bottles left over from the weekend that got open, maybe somebody came in and they opened something special and they've got, half a bottle or a quarter of a bottle. In most cases, if you sort of, present yourself as a connoisseur, an expert, of somebody who knows what they're talking about, appreciates the product, appreciates where you are, they're going to be much more willing to pour you a little bit of that to try it. Because again, in a tasting room, it's all about the sale. And if I have the opportunity to, sell you a $100 bottle of a wine that I already have open versus our regular $50 bottles, I'm going to do that if I have an inkling that you're the type of person that will spend $100 on a bottle.
Fair point.
Yeah,
or like $40 on like a couple of big bombers, like I do.
Whatever it might be.
Right,
exactly.
Right. I'm a sucker for all this shit. So anyway, Doug, are you done?
Oh, I'm done.
Kern, are you done? How far did
I
you
still got, I was pacing myself. Again, I didn't get the memo about the 3, so I still got about half a bottle here. But rumor has it there's an after party, so I'm certainly game for hanging out. Are we, as my co-host says, are we just hanging out or are we partying?
We're just we're partying. So
we're just partying.
That guy, man.
So we usually review our beers. So I enjoyed all my beers tonight. I started with the old Munich Lager, which everybody should know about. If you don't, figure it out. It's good shit. It's very good. Again, this is good all around, man. It was good. My first beer. This is a good first beer tonight.
Yeah.
Like, good warm up.
Starter beer.
Crisp. It's nice.
It's a day drinking beer right there.
More well-known German beer.
Yeah, it's what my lady calls beery beer. Like, this is what a beer tastes like.
Don't drink Bud, drink that.
Well, or unlike a beer with cocoa nibs and all that. But anyway, we're on that cocoa nibs. There's something about it today. So we have a mojito. I'm not sure why it's a mojito. Maybe because it didn't have any mint in it, because I didn't get any. But I did get freshness, juiciness. It was pretty refreshing. I like it. It's a pretty good one. Again, I want a little bit more mint though. If you're gonna say mojito, or maybe that's why it was a mojito. But they did put mint all over.
I was gonna say that's a very classic mojito look to it. So there should be mint in something like that.
Right, but just like everything with beer, who knows? Like maybe mint only stays in the beer for like 2 seconds. I'm not even sure. And like you were talking about how like brewery and beer, you can just add all kinds of craziness and it works. Whereas in wine, they'd be like, "What are you adding mint to my wine?"
Throw shit in. Let's see what happens.
Exactly. Yes.
I also fear maybe I'm wrong. I think that, this is in my head, that wine people are more purists than beer people.
We are, but here's the thing: like, wine people have had a longer lead-in, and you're starting to get the beer people are starting to catch up in that. Where you're getting your, we have a thing in wine where we say the ABC people, anything but Chardonnay, who just refuse to drink Chardonnays because so many Chardonnays have been over-oaked and are buttery and what. To me, the flip side of that is the IPA bros. That, like, if I'm going to drink a beer, it's going to be an IPA, bro. I'm not going to do a stout. I'm not going to do a Pils. I'm not going to do a lambic. I'm doing IPA, and that's it.
Right. Correct. You nailed it. I think it's the grapes that are in Chardonnay that I don't like. I even put it on our YouTube page. Don't tell Kern I absolutely hate Chardonnays.
Yeah, you know what? Here's the thing. To me, wine, I say you can drink whatever you like. You can use as many words as you want to describe wine. It comes down to 2 things. It comes down to this, or it comes down to this. Either I like it or I don't. And whatever you like, as long as you're drinking, I don't care. Except for white Zinfandel. That shit fucking sucks. Do not drink white Zinfandel.
Yes. I wanted to ask you before you got off, what is the one beer style or wine style that you cannot tolerate?
So there are 2. When I had my old wine shop down in Southern California, I had on the tasting bar a jar that I called the Zin Sin jar. And I had 2 styles of wine that if anybody came in and asked for or mentioned those by name, sight unseen, they would have to put $1 in the Zin Sin jar. One of them is white Zinfandel, as we just mentioned. The other one I feel like is a little more indigenous to California, although there are examples of it around the country, but it's very, very popular in Southern California. And it gets back to one of the things we're talking about. There's a winery in the Temecula region, which is actually just north of San Diego. It's an emerging wine region out there. A winery called Wilson Creek that has become synonymous with making a sparkling wine with almond extract flavor into it. And they call it an almond champagne. and it is the most god-awful thing that you've ever put in your mouth. And again, another example why wine should be unadulterated, and you should never add extra flavorings or fruit or anything like that to your wine, with the exception of sangria, but I don't even think of that as wine anymore. I think of that as more of a cocktail in many senses. So
Fair.
White Zinfandel, sparkling nut wine, as we used to call it in the shop. Those are the two styles that I cannot abide anybody drinking.
Excellent.
So now I have to do my review. This is gonna be great.
Well, I got my last one. My favorite one was obviously the peanut butter porter from Dangerous Man.
So the sparkling nut beer.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. Cheers. What's up, Doug?
So I'm gonna say that I had a tie for, and I'm a least favorite's wrong. These are both good. The Dragon's Milk White and this Clax. I know you guys gave me a lot of shit for this. I'm gonna tell you, super good.
Yeah, I'm here. That's true. I did. It wasn't so much that I gave you shit, because I, if you would have come out and been like, "Oh, this is the best beer I've ever had," kind of thing. No, you're the guinea pig who tried it out for us, and you gave us an honest opinion. I appreciate that.
So I just thought that was inventive and not something I've ever had before. And it was good. It was drinkable and really good. It wasn't.
I still need to taste that too. Yeah.
No, I will get some of that to you.
It's like a wrap. It's a wrap my head around the concept.
Yeah. So this was narrowly, like, none of them were outstanding and like, oh my God, this is blowing my mind. So this was the milk stout from Mass Landing called Gunner's Daughter. Really, really, really good. None of these were high ABV. It was 5, 5.5, and 6. Like, literally went up in increments. The Dragon's Milk and all that was good. But I'm just telling you that for pure taste, this was just slightly ahead of the other two.
Nice.
I like the Dragon's Milk, and it pains me to not make that the winner, because I'm such a huge fan of their bourbon barrel aged stout, but it was good. It was drinkable. It's something that you'd be like, oh yeah, that's really good. I can drink multiples of that. It's not something that like I said, when you have a blonde stout and it's like super creamy, where it like fills you up, it's not like that. It's just really drinkable. But that milk stout, I really, really enjoyed, and obviously the lime stout I enjoyed. So I don't know. I say they're all like, here's 1A and there's 2 1Bs, so it's 1B, 1B.
Nice.
They're
Craig,
all,
I'm a little disappointed you do not have a tab of porn open on your screen there.
Oh, he has before. He just didn't tell you.
Yeah, you shouldn't have taken it off then.
Pornhub.
Here is my porn. Next.
Beer Hub.
All right. So I am absolutely thoroughly enjoying the 2016 Celle de la Terre from McPrice Myers. It's got a juiciness to it. Lots of just beautiful red cherry fruit on this. A little bit of earthiness as well, but it's not your like heavier, richer Spanish style. It's kind of that nice medium between the lighter, brighter Grenache and then that heavier Spanish style. So just super well balanced. It's really opening up nicely in the glass. The aromatics are really starting to shoot out with a lot of that almost like a cherry pie or a cherry cordial kind of fragrance on it. And just super smooth, has nice length to it, great acidity. You get a little bit of that greenness from the whole cluster fermentation. Just really, really well done across the board. Huge fan of this wine. This is the 13 you're seeing here, but the 16 I'm drinking now is kicking ass and taking names.
And how did the flavor profiles, did it change a little bit as it aged over the hour?
It did. It definitely opened up. More of the fruit started to show up. You did get a little bit more of the tannin, the tannin, but it was a very soft, almost like a chalky tannin. It wasn't super grippy, super rough, sandpapery. It's just very subtle in that, which almost increases the length of the wine. But definitely the aromatics started showing through more. Like I said, you're getting more of like a cherry laser beam sort of hitting your nose as soon as you stick it in the glass, as opposed to when I first poured it. And you're getting a little bit more of that kind of dried fruit, that compote, that cordial note to it, which is nice.
And lastly, what would you pair that with?
Wow. Well, after we finish here, I may be going to get some In-N-Out burger, so that might be my best pairing with it. But
Interesting.
this would be great with a filet mignon. Actually, what I'd really love to pair this with is a nice pepper crusted seared ahi would be fantastic with something like this. Because it's a fleshy fish. It's got a lot of richness to it. And then the dark pepper, I think, would really pair nicely with the acidity that's on this.
I love the range you gave us. You gave us like,
yeah. When I had my old website, I would do the like down the middle food pairing. I would do the super high end one, and then I would do the fast food pairing with the wine. Because you know what? There are going to come times where you want all three of those things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Kern, it's been fascinating. It's been enlightening.
This was a blast, gentlemen. I love this. I love crossing over to the other side and hanging out with beer brethren. You know, like I said, we're all brothers in inebriation, and that's the most important thing here.
And we need to have you back early next year so you can tell us about some spring wines. See, now Absolutely. We know about wines. We're going to bring you back, and then you're going to teach about
rosés are my jam, bitches. We'll do a whole episode on rosés. I'll send you guys some stuff. And Doug, just so you're forewarned,
a whole bunch of bombs on that. Rosés, motherfuckers.
Well, especially now that they're doing like rosé beers and whatnot, which just blows my mind. I've started.
Where are those at?
At least here in California, I know Firestone is doing a rosé based beer. And a few others.
I've seen it here too.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say in the Finger Lakes, I know Wagner Brewery is doing a version of it. So my good friend Aaron Bailey works up at Wagner Vineyards. If you get a chance to head up there, shout out to Aaron. Hey, Aaron.
Eric Bailey. All right.
Aaron. She's a girl.
Oh, my bad.
So,
she's got huge tracts of land.
What do you think about brewed IPAs? Because they're really whiny beers, in my opinion.
Yeah, you know what? I have not had a brewed IPA. I would be fascinated to try one because I do tend to slip into IPA bro mode at times.
Well, champagne yeast is the thing about brewed IPAs.
Oh, really? Is that what they're doing with it?
Yes. So when you see a brewed IPA, you need to jump on that, man, and then we need to talk about it.
I will come back on the show once I have had a brewed IPA. And I was going to send a word of warning out to your co-host Doug. Season 3, 1 bourbon, 1 charter, 1 beer. You were on our guest list hit list, my friend. So be prepared. We're going to have you on.
What? Me?
Yes. It too.
All right. Well, I'm all about it, man. I'm down.
I'm all about completing sets. I'm a completist, so we can't just have Greg and not have you. Like that would be.
That and listen to my show so you don't make the same mistakes I did. You'll hear some mistakes that I made. You will. It's true.
Do listen to the episodes.
Yeah. Right. If you listen to them,
I'm gonna make all the
mistakes I did. Right. And as a noob, it was my first time. I made some mistakes. So like you can avoid them, Doug.
Man.
Right.
Hey man,
but, Doug, it's fucking awesome, man. It's awesome how the guys do it. I'm not gonna give anything away or Kern give it away. I don't give any industry.
No, you're not spoiling anything. I mean the format is there. But I won't say who won or who lost. And I promise, Doug, we are gentle and tender and soft when it comes to first timers.
I'm all for that.
And it's fun, man. It's a fun ass,
all the love.
fun ass time. You will laugh for literally 3 hours.
Excellent.
Literally. So,
Awesome.
2 episodes. Just don't worry. 2 episodes, people. It's not 1 3-hour episode. That would be bad.
no. One episode came out today. I'm gonna blast it around. It's great. And Doug, yeah, man, you gotta, yeah.
We got you. We're your hookup.
So
Right,
we will. The reason I have this, Doug, is because next week I will be in Cleveland, seeing the Browns. Hopefully,
Seeing the Browns lose.
What? It's the Bills. It's the Bills.
Aren't the Bills like 6-2 or something?
Yeah, and they're gonna give one back. They have to. Right?
Got it.
Right. They're not that good. Right. No, but I'm going to Cleveland.
Baker Suckfield.
So I don't know, Doug. I don't know if I love how this is all live. I don't know if I'll be available next week. So this is what I want to show.
I will find someone to fucking drink and just bullshit with us.
Yeah, Kern, right.
Actually, I'm trying to think. I think I have plans on Friday, but let me check my calendar.
Anyway, thanks for watching Brothers and Booze. Kern, thanks for being a wonderful guest host.
Thanks, gentlemen. This was a blast. I enjoyed it. Thank you for having me. And again, everybody out there, wherever you get your podcast, check out One Bourbon, One Shard, or One Beer. Just like the George Thorogood song, except shard instead of shot.
Yes, and it's fantastic. How many episodes you guys got?
Oh God, we are. I think we are at this point either at or approaching 60. We do a brand new episode every other week. Steb and I have been doing this since 2017. We're excited about the new year. We're launching season 3 in January. We've got some great guests already lined up. Doug Ziegler is going to be on the show, among other people.
Oh, and really?
I have some insane.
Where are your good guests?
I have some insane playlists already lined up, which
will be on every episode this season.
Yes, he is our go-to fallback guy from now on.
Yeah, I'm all down.
On that note, we will see you guys next week. Cheers.
Cheers.